All right, so chapter 1, if you remember, it was kind of like a flashback. I'm spoiling some of the book, but it starts off with Sam the lion. He's a dachshund. What's a dachshund?
A wiener dog?
A wiener dog. So he's a wiener dog. Looks like he's a light brown wiener dog based on the cover. He's got 3 legs. One leg is a ladle or a spoon. He looks pretty well beat up. He's about ready to give up. Where's he at that moment? He's in a dog fighting ring. Bunch of smelly old guys waving money around. He talks about how like humans wash everything, but they never wash their money. And if you didn't know this, dogs have an incredibly great sense of smell, much more sensitive to smells than humans. And so he's got a good sniffer on him, and just all these sights and sounds and smells are overwhelming him. And he's in a dogfighting ring. His owner, the guy that has him, the rough-handed man, I think they called him, he's like, come on, you got to stand up, you got to fight. And what does he actually do? He lays down, and he's dreaming about another time. And we said his owner, her name was Heidi, I believe it was. And as he's laying down, dreaming, staring up at the light, basically giving himself up, what's staring him down on the other side of the dogfighting ring?
Not a pit bull, but it's a tall or something.
Kind of like a pit bull. It is a bull terrier, a big bull terrier, big, muscular, strong dog with pointy mouth. And he is staring down Sam the lion from across the ring. And Sam basically lays down, and he's most likely going to die. And as they're looking at him, at the end of that chapter, they're like, no way, that can't be. You look at Sam, and what's he doing while he's laying there?
Smiling.
He's smiling because he's dreaming of another time. So that's where we left off. That gets you caught up. Chapter 2. Up. 3 years before, in another time, in another place, late August, Heidi McLeod sat in the last row of the airplane as it taxied toward a small terminal and looked out the left-hand side window, changing her life forever. Years later, she suggested to other people whose lives were on a crummy, hopeless, dead-end path that a good thing to do is to look in the direction exactly opposite of which you were going to look. Catch life by surprise. If she had been seated on the right side of the plane, she would have only seen fat green hills dotted with fat cows. She would have wondered if cows attacked. She would have seen the elegant sign over the terminal door greeting visitors. Piddleton, Vermont, home of the world's most beautiful dogs. Oh, brother, I don't belong here, she would have said with a grimace of remembrance. A single word would have occurred to her: run! And she would have dropped her bags at that moment, and she'd left the plane and made a dash in the direction of Fiji, where she'd read somewhere that 14-year-olds were considered fully grown and could legally lie around the beach their entire lives eating fruit roll-ups. That sounds like a pretty good life to me. But Heidi didn't look out the right side window because back in St. Paul, Minnesota, the nuns of St. Egregious Home for Troubly Girls had strapped her in row 40 on the left. They had assumed correctly that it was the farthest point from the cabin door on the right, and she'd have trouble getting to it when it occurred to her somewhere over Indiana that a pleated school skirt might make a decent parachute. So it was the left window that she pressed her face on and looked down. A dozen dog crates were stacked on the tarmac. Each had a shipping label, like boxes of tomatoes, thought Heidi. They had just been offloaded from a cargo compartment of a large plane, waiting to be picked up by their new Piddleton owners. Each held a different kind of dog, the world's most beautiful dogs, all of whom were sleeping or looking stupidly at the air molecules go by, except one. The dachshund looked up through the chrome bars at the young human female. Ha ha, they've got you too, he said aloud. The girl's face pressed against the glass of the airplane above him. He sighed and added, your crate is better. The dachshund knew almost nothing about people. He knew the rubber boots of the one that used to clean his kennel and bring him his kibble. But he never spoken to the man. The last 3 hours in the plane only added to his life experience: a plastic shipping crate, a smell of jet exhaust, and the sound of turbine engines. And now a new young human face was looking down at him. He stared back. As he stared at her and she stared at him, 50 feet and millions of years of evolution separated them. The sight of the human girl inspired the first murmurings of a primordial dog instinct rumbling deep inside his dog's skull, and a single thought slowly rose to pop into his dog brain. I want, he said, one of those. Suddenly, a much different face filled the cage's opening, peering through the bars 1 inch away from his nose. It was a much older and rounder and smelled of perfume, hairspray, and broccoli, and bacon quiche. It squealed, "My handsome boy! My handsome boy!" A large, squarish woman in a hairy blue chinchilla fur coat and hat unlatched the cage door and pulled the young dachshund out, holding him up high for a first inspection. She rolled up her coat sleeves and stretched his torso, arching his back while one hand collapsed his muzzle, holding him high. She examined backbone, neck, shoulders, forehead, rump, teeth, eyes. Did they align perfectly? She cocked her head, closed one purple eyelid, and sighted down his nose. "Gorgeous! Just what I ordered! Straight and true," she purred. She squeezed the dog's thighs. Heidi watched from inside the plane above. She'd seen holiday shoppers inspect something else in the very same way. What was it? A Christmas ham. On an instinctual level, the same thought occurred to the dachshund. No, don't eat me, furry human," he cried out. But the vice-like fingers held his mouth shut. A whimper emerged. His eyes could move, though, and he could see that the large woman must have fallen down the stairs recently. Her lips, nails, nose, cheek, and eyes were all discolored into horrible shades of purple. He shuddered at what monstrous hues might glisten on her other unseen parts. Suddenly the woman froze, her eyes locked at the top of his head. "Good Lord into holy butter! The cranial Douglets tooth," she said. A shaking finger reached out and touched a wisp of fur curling up from a point at the top of the dachshund's skull. Pierre Douglets was an 18th century Austrian breeder who died without fulfilling his life's dream of producing a lime green colored dachshund. Instead, he left behind a highly prized genetic abnormality that forever carries both his name and his eternal shame. A little curly wisp of hair on top of the head. If you take a look at the picture, you can see it right at the very top of his head. Now, I just want you to know, a tuft of hair is like a little wisp of hair. I like saying Douglet tuft because I think it's kind of fun to say that. So that's what I'm going to keep talking. Or that's how I'm going to keep saying it.
Little Rascals?
Like alfalfa from the Little Rascals. You got it. A little tuft. A little curly wisp of hair at top of the head. For the large woman in the chinchilla coat, it was the holy grail of dachshunddom. She spun around and faced the airport man in the white overalls behind her. She thrust the dog into the man's face. "Look! Look! The Douglets stuffed! The Douglets stuffed!" "My name is Douglets?" thought the dog. "Oh," whispered the great woman in an ecstatic gargle of awe. "This one will finally win me the Westminster Championship." The man rolled his eyes. Mrs. Nutbush, as usual, you'll have to wait until the shipping papers are processed. You can pick them up in cargo in a few minutes, though. Well, there it is," Mrs. Nutbush said, and with a flourish placed the dog back into his crate. She bent down and put her face to the bars. "Mommy's little world champion." The man rolled his eyes. "Sorry. Oh, well, there it is. Mommy's little world champion." She smiled broadly, but the dachshund noticed that she wasn't looking at his eyes, but rather at his tooth. "Be beautiful," she purred. "I'll be back for you, sweet pea." She loped off, bounced, really. The dog stood in the crate, dazed, her words of doom still ringing in his ears. I'll be back. He looked the other way and saw a green ocean of grass in the distance. It rippled like inviting waves, waves a dog could run through forever. Then he looked down at the latch on the crate's bars. In a crisis, dogs can be simple in their thoughts. In this case, he had just one. Out! He tried to unhook the latch with his teeth. They weren't reaching. His tongue. Use the tongue. He wrapped it around the strange loop of metal and yanked sideways. Harder, harder, he muttered. Slippery, stupid. Come on, old Douglets, get a grip on it. Out, 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 out. As he struggled in panic, his eyes happened to go back up into the window of the plane opposite, where the young human female's face still peered down at him. He couldn't hear, of course, but she was mouthing something behind the glass. Up, she was saying. Pull it up. Chapter 3.